We're fractured as a society, I think, as a consumer of news. There's so many different news outlets, so many ways of receiving information. There's not that communal feeling of we all watched the same thing last night.
Do you feel overwhelmed by the amount of information you see on the internet? As online platforms become a bigger part of our daily lives, we're constantly flooded with information, some more reliable than others. It's hard to determine who's posting, their level of subject expertise, and their motivations behind sharing that information. Hi, I'm Erin Mason, Director of Mid-Continent Public Library. Libraries connect people with information, but for decades, they've also worked to promote information literacy, defined as a set of abilities that enable individuals to recognize when information is needed and to locate, evaluate, and use that information effectively. Digital media literacy is an extension of information literacy, which takes those concepts and applies them to any virtual space, from news reports to social media. With the overload of information that we're exposed to every day, now more than ever, it's important to strengthen our digital media literacy so that each of us can evaluate the things we see online and use that information to make informed decisions. Community Relations Manager Emily Becker and our digital innovation team had conversations with local journalists to help consumers of news make sense of the media landscape.
In part 1 of this series, we spoke with several local journalists from a variety of mediums to find out how traditional journalism is produced, including the research and review process that happens before a story is released to the public. Now we're going to look at the influence of social media algorithms and artificial intelligence and the effect they're having on the spread of misinformation and what individuals can do to identify this information and stop its spread. Social media is a big part of journalism today. It's not all bad. Social media can be a helpful tool for journalists and consumers alike.
In so many ways, social media helps us to tell our stories or to find stories or to find people.
The great thing about social media is you can look at it at any time of the day, whereas the news is on at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. So I use social media to try and give real-time updates of what's happening in the news. If I'm at a city council meeting where they're deciding some sort of big initiative, I can kind of give a play-by-play of what's going on during that council meeting with updates on X or on Instagram stories or something like that. And then once they finally reach a decision, put the whole story out on our TV news at 6 o'clock, but we can also put it out earlier on social media and give people that information.
On the flip side, misinformation is rampant online.
Some of it is accidental. Some of it is purposeful. I mean, there's an idea that as long as we just create chaos, it's to our benefit because a chaotic situation can lead to some voter decisions based on that and not necessarily on how what you feel about taxes or spending or whatever. But it's an example of how misinformation can distort decision-making.
There is so much information out there for consumers, but that means there's a lot of information for journalists to sort through, as well as verify its accuracy. How do they balance that volume of information with the expectation of online news being instantly available?
Sometimes stories take longer to report than we would like to. We would like to release a certain story on a certain deadline, but sometimes if we can't confirm what's in the story, or if we can't be absolutely certain what we're reporting is truthful or accurate or fair, then we're going to hold it and wait until we can get that information. And it's a very intoxicating thing to want to do, is to be first with the story, to break news in old-fashioned parlance. But especially with public radio, one of our efforts is to make sure we're fair and we're accurate and still trying to report it as fast as we can. And that's part of the challenge in today's environment too.
When I asked for examples of how they have seen misinformation spread online, Caitlin brought up an incident where there was a shooting and a large crowd at the end of the 2024 Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade.
Take, for example, the Chiefs parade and rally and the shooting. So I was there that day. And after it happened, there were rumors about who was involved, who the shooter was it someone who was in the country illegally? There was a gentleman who had his name and his picture blasted all over the internet, and it turned out he had nothing to do with it. So seeing those things, seeing political misinformation that's spread, it's really frustrating. And people sometimes come down on the media, well, why can't you, again, going back to the rally and the shooting, why can't you tell us who those shooters were? Why can't you tell us who has been arrested? And in that instance, initially, they were juveniles who were arrested. Law enforcement, prosecutors can't legally tell us. That information is protected. Ethically, we can't release that. We're bound to standards. So it's not a matter of withholding information, but again, you would see misinformation. And so sometimes we try not to engage in, I would say, combative conversations or arguments with people online. But those are instances where you can take to media, and I think I took to X at the time to say, just to be clear, we don't know. Law enforcement can't tell us, and even if we did know, we're ethically bound to not tell you. They're a juvenile, they're protected, this is the way it works in the state of Missouri. We are not withholding any information from you.
The spread of misinformation is accelerated on social media due to the company's use of algorithms. An algorithm is a set of instructions that tells a computer program how to process information. It can process the massive amount of information that's found online. Social media sites use algorithms to keep consumers engaged with their site by tailoring an individual's speed to show more of the types of things they have interacted with previously. So our previous use of social media sites informs what is recommended to us. Caitlin discussed how this can create personal bubbles that continuously affirm our beliefs.
Well, one thing thinking about that is you hear the term echo chamber. And so the thing that is disturbing about social media is these social media sites rely on algorithms. So if you read a story about a particular politician, for example, and it's framed in a certain light, these social media sites are going to see that. So they're going to keep pushing content that they think that you want. So they're not presenting you with the balanced meal, using that analogy, right? They're not giving you your meat and your broccoli and your fruit and your milk. They're saying, ooh, you like the chocolate cake. We're going to give you this chocolate cake, and we're going to keep sending this your way. And so when you only get your news from social media, you're not getting a fair representation of what's out there and of credible sources. So that's something that's so dangerous. Again, social media, they're feeding you what they think you want, not necessarily what you need.
Another new technology adding to the confusion is artificial intelligence, a system that can perform complex tasks that were previously thought only capable by humans. Generative AI is the most common type, and it can take a text prompt and use it to create original text, images, or even video.
It's kind of this omnipresent object floating out there on the internet, and sometimes it's really hard to tell what is generated from artificial intelligence and what isn't, or how people are using it to write an article or to write the foundation for an article. And so it's important to be transparent, I think, if you're using artificial intelligence, and let the viewing public know what they're seeing and where it originated and things along those lines. Not everybody plays by those rules, though.
AI is so new that we as an industry are still trying to come to terms with how do we keep an eye out for it and make sure that we don't unintentionally pass along replicas and fakes to the public. Most often it would be through images. That's where I think typically you would see that online right now. And so I think we are much more wary of images sent in from unknown sources. If it's a picture of, hey, we're looking for pictures of you playing in the snow, we're not as worried about that coming in. But if it's, hey, I got a picture of somebody committing a crime, we would think long and hard before airing that. And again, we would send an image to the police, to the fire department, to EMS, anybody to say, can you corroborate this? Does this look right to you? I mean, there are certain tells that you can look for in pictures that show that they've been altered. And so really looking it over closely with multiple sets of eyes. But I think that the days of viewer videos and viewer photos rushing to make air were much more skeptical than we were. And the average person at home consuming this on their phone or their tablet should be as well. Just because you see something doesn't mean that it's genuine, that it's authentic.
Given the issues that are prevalent in digital media and online information, what can consumers do to distinguish quality news sources and articles from misinformation? The journalists shared a few suggestions.
The public needs to become journalists themselves. They need to approach consumption of news with a journalist's attitude, asking questions, trying to understand what someone's motivation is, what someone's agenda might be behind a story.
And before you believe something, whether it's about politics and it's maybe you read it and it resonates with you because it reaffirms your beliefs. So you think this has to be true. Do your homework. Go back and check. Is there an article that this corresponds to? Can you find where that person said that word for word? If you see a statistic, before you share it, go back and look. Is there anything that factually supports this? And even if it's shared by someone you know, asking them, where did this come from? Where did you get this picture? Is it from someone you know firsthand? Did they take the photo? Did it come from a reputable news outlet? Where are these images coming from? Are they telling you where they got this information? Are they telling you that this came from the head of the FBI, or this came from the mayor or a chief of police? Are they using unnamed sources? And sometimes there are instances where you might use an unnamed source, but if you can avoid that, again, that goes further with transparency with the public.
But it is going to be a matter of the public learns to inform themselves and understand people's motivations, people's agendas when the consumer is receiving a story. Everyone should be asking themselves, why am I receiving this message? Why am I reading this story? Who is saying this, and what purpose would they have by saying these things that I'm reading or listening to?
There are lots of ways to find out what you need to know, but you have to seek it out. It's not going to be plopped in your lap anymore.
They also shared some red flags to look for to identify possible misinformation.
Sometimes a red flag is just how quickly the article spreads. How viral it becomes can sometimes be a red flag in and of itself, and a kind of a notion to say, hey, let me take a second glance at this information.
I think if you read something or you're watching something, is the language inflammatory? Are they using adjectives? How are they describing this? If they're telling you straight down the middle, politician said this, and there's a quote. But if it starts describing their actions or trying to tie them into an ulterior motive, I think you just have to really ask yourself, is this unbiased reporting?
Compare the headline to the actual body of the story, and if the headline and the body aren't quite matching up or seem to be on two different topics or two different wavelengths, I would think twice about the content of the article. Read more than just the headlines. Headlines are designed to get you to click on an article. They're designed to make you want to pick up and buy that newspaper. They're designed to get you to read more. They don't always have the entire story in the headline, or sometimes they may be a little misleading. So it's important for you to go beyond the headline and actually read the story to give yourself more of a context of exactly what's happening.
They also suggest reading from multiple sources to help evaluate information.
I think it's really important to sample different types of media. Read more than one source. Check the newspaper and the local TV station and some internet websites and other magazines, and make sure that you're getting a clearer picture, giving yourself as much context as you can.
There are similarities in two publications from different sides of the spectrum. Look for the similarities, and that's where you're going to find kind of the kernel of truth of the story. Mm-hmm. For example, you love MSNBC, and that is your primary news outlet. That's fine. Are you going to see what Fox News is reporting, and vice versa? I will check multiple news sources, and again, some that tend to be either one way or another, just to see what are they reporting. And then I'm going to compare that with something that I consider to be down the middle, and not just me. This is what, people far smarter than me who have looked and who have analyzed that data have said, these are right down the middle. These are the most unbiased sources of news. I'm going to go and look at NPR. I'm going to look at the AP, and how are they reporting this? And then I'm going to notice, how does this differ from these other sources? So I think if you want to know if your news outlet has any type of bias, you can look for, I believe it's the Ad Fontes media bias chart, but looking for anything that says media bias chart, and it will show you this diagram. Is someone far right, far left? Are they right in the middle? And so those news sources in the middle, those are what you're looking for. Those are the news outlets that are going to be the most trusted, that are going to have the least amount of bias. And maybe those are the conversations I have with my family or friends, or when my family and friends share something with me. Well, where did you see that? Where did you read that? Then I can tell them, hey, have you checked out this AP article? It's really straight down the middle, just factual. You should check that out and maybe compare.
Even when we see a story we agree with, skepticism can be an important tool.
I would love to see that. I would love it if all news viewers would approach the media they're consuming that way, to say, do I just like this because it's reaffirming what I believe?
Why should people care if they're getting inaccurate information, especially if it's what they want to hear?
If you only pay attention to the sources that you already believe in, then your thinking is never challenged. You never get a sense of an alternative way to look at things. And to some degree, we're in that world now.
Misinformation is not going away. But by being skeptical, looking for red flags, and broadening our information sources, we can take a proactive approach to becoming more discerning of the things we see online and help curb the spread of misinformation.